You know that brown paper bag sitting under the kitchen sink, the one Grandpa kept a big old gallon jug in? Not Windex, not Pine Sol, just vinegar, plain, sharp smelling. Cost you less than $3 vinegar. And that man cleaned the whole house with it, fixed his sore throat with it, kept the ants out with it, softened his shirts with it, made his collard greens sing with it. You were too young to understand what you were watching. You thought it was just an old man being cheap. But he wasn't being cheap. He was being brilliant. He was carrying 7,000 years of human wisdom in a plastic jug, and he was pouring it out quietly every single day, right there in that house where you grew up. Today, we're exploring 42 vinegar hacks so powerful, so deeply proven, and so brilliantly simple that they will make you feel something, and then make you reach for a bottle immediately. Let's start with the one that changed how everything gets clean: the windows. That streak free, crystal clear glass that your grandmother could see herself in on a Saturday morning. She didn't have a fancy spray with a blue chemical label. She had a bottle she'd filled herself, equal parts white distilled vinegar and water, poured into a glass bottle she saved and reused year after year. She'd spray it on the window, take a sheet of old newspaper, back when newspaper was something you read with your hands, and wipe in one smooth, deliberate stroke. No streaks, no residue, no perfume cloud that made your eyes water. Just clean. Vinegar's acetic acid cuts through grease and dissolves the hard water mineral deposits that cause streaking, and there's no waxy buildup left behind the way commercial sprays leave. What Windex costs you today, about $5 to $8 a bottle, your grandparents handled for pennies, and they got the same result. Sometimes the same result isn't good enough. Sometimes the old way is actually better. And speaking of better, the microwave. Oh, you know the microwave. That science experiment developing in the corner of the kitchen, the one with the spaghetti explosion from 1998 that never fully came off. All you need is a quarter cup of white vinegar mixed into 1 cup of water, placed in a microwave-safe bowl. Heat it on high for 2 to 3 minutes until the inside fogs up like a bathroom mirror. Then leave the door closed for 5 more minutes. Don't open it. Let that steam work. When you finally do open that door, everything, every caked on splatter, every hardened drop, wipes away with a single cloth. No scrubbing, no chemicals, just steam and science and patience. It's almost too easy. That's what good knowledge feels like. Your grandpa kept his coffee maker running 20 years past what anyone thought was possible. The secret lived in his monthly ritual: 4 cups of straight white vinegar poured directly into the reservoir, left to sit for 30 minutes, then run through a full brew cycle without a single coffee ground inside. The dark water that came through looked like something that had been living in the machine for months, because it had been. After that, he'd run 2 or 3 plain water cycles to flush every trace out. Coffee makers, doctors will tell you, are among the most bacteria-laden appliances in the American home. Mineral buildup, oily coffee residue, even mold colonies, all of it undone by a few cups of the same liquid they've sold since the Babylonians figured out fermentation 5,000 years ago. Let's talk about the washing machine and about how your clothes used to feel. There was a softness to laundered cotton in that era that you cannot replicate with those purple dryer sheets that come 300 to a box. What your grandmother used was one simple thing: a half cup of white vinegar in the fabric softener dispenser at the start of the final rinse. That's it. The acetic acid dissolved all the mineral deposits and detergent residue that builds up in the fibers over time. That residue is the very reason clothes feel stiff and scratchy after washing. Commercial fabric softeners coat fibers in a waxy chemical film to simulate softness. Vinegar strips away what's making them rough. It doesn't fake soft. It restores it. If you add 3 to 4 drops of lavender oil in with that vinegar, your towels come out smelling like something you'd pay $30 for at a hotel gift shop. And the towels, good Lord, the towels. If your towels smell like a basement after they dry, if they've developed that low, damp, sour odor that no amount of detergent seems to touch, there's only one fix. Load them into the washer, pour 1 full cup of white vinegar directly into the drum, and run a hot water cycle. No detergent, no dryer sheets, nothing else. Then run a second cycle immediately after with your regular detergent. Dry them on high heat and take them out the moment the cycle ends. What you've just killed is the bacteria colony that lives inside wet towel fibers, the organism responsible for that smell that modern science has now confirmed exists, that our grandparents were eliminating by instinct decades before the research caught up. Now, let's step into the kitchen and let's talk about something Grandpa knew that they don't teach in culinary school. Rice, perfect, fluffy, non-clumping rice. He added 1 teaspoon of white vinegar per cup of rice to the boiling water before the rice went in. The acetic acid breaks down the excess surface starch on each grain, the same starch responsible for that gluey, a gummy clumping that makes rice stick to itself in a single mass. The vinegar smell evaporates with the steam during cooking. You will taste absolutely nothing, but what you'll see when you lift that lid is something remarkable. Individual grains, separate and perfect, each one steamed through and tender. Modern food scientists have confirmed this mechanism. Grandpa confirmed it decades before they did. Those same hands that made the rice also knew how to make eggs that peeled themselves. The hard-boiled egg trick that made the kids gather around. Add 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar and half a teaspoon of salt to the pot before boiling. The mild acid permeates the eggshell, eroding the calcium carbonate just enough to weaken the bond between shell and membrane. When it's time to peel, the shell practically slides off in 2 pieces. For the poached eggs, the Sunday morning luxury, the ones that sat on top of buttered toast with yolks like liquid gold, he added 2 tablespoons of white vinegar to the simmering water. The acid makes the egg white protein set faster, pulling them inward into a tight, compact, perfect shape, instead of spreading out into that ghostly white cloud that floats away from the yolk. That's not a trick. That's chemistry, the kind that lived in Grandpa's hands before it ever lived in a textbook. His cornbread was something else entirely, something that rose high and stayed tender and held together when you broke it apart. The secret was the buttermilk, except there was no buttermilk. There was a tablespoon of white vinegar placed in the bottom of a measuring cup, then whole milk poured in until it reached the 1 cup line. I stirred and left to stand for 10 minutes. The acid curdles the milk proteins in a way that perfectly mimics true buttermilk's chemistry, activating baking soda with a reliable rise and keeping the crumb moist. Buttermilk in 1965 cost more and wasn't always on the shelf. White vinegar was always on the shelf. It was always $3. It was always there when you needed it. That's the beauty of this knowledge. It was engineered for the real world, not the ideal one. Let's go outside for a moment, to the garden where another kind of wisdom grew. The weeds that crept in through the cracks of the sidewalk, up through the fence line, between the rows of tomatoes and collards. He killed them with a mixture he made himself. 1 gallon of white vinegar, 1 cup of table salt, 1 tablespoon of liquid dish soap, all combined in a pump sprayer, applied on a dry, sunny day above 70 degrees, right at midday when the sun could help it work. The acid burned through the cell walls of the plants, the salt drew out their moisture, and the dish soap broke down the waxy coating on the leaves so everything else could penetrate. He sprayed only where nothing should grow, because he understood what the label on a commercial weed killer doesn't always tell you. This mixture doesn't discriminate. It is not selective. It ends everything it touches. Use it with intention, and it works exactly as designed. Inside, the pests. There was a summer somewhere in your memory when the fruit flies appeared. A jar of peaches left out too long, an overripe banana turning black on the counter, and suddenly there they were, dozens of them, circling the kitchen like tiny helicopters with nowhere to go. Grandpa had a jar in the window within 10 minutes, a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar, a 1/4 cup of water, 2 drops of dish soap, a piece of plastic wrap stretched over the top, secured by a rubber band with a few small holes poked through with a toothpick. The vinegar smells like fermenting fruit to a fruit fly. It smells like everything they love in the world. The soap breaks the surface tension so they sink the moment they land. One trap catches dozens in a single night. It costs less than a dime to make. The store-bought version costs $8 and has the same principle printed on the back in smaller liters than they should. And for the ants, because ants were always coming, seeking out the sugar jar, finding the crack under the back door, marching in a single line with the discipline of soldiers, a half and half mixture of white vinegar and water in a spray bottle applied directly to their trail, the entry point, the baseboards, the windowsills. Vinegar's pungent scent disrupts and permanently masks the pheromone trails that ants use to communicate with one another. Without that chemical message on the floor, the column falls apart. They don't know where they were going or how they got there. Spray it, let it dry, and the trail is gone. Grandpa knew this because his mother knew it, and her mother knew it before that. His throat remedy, the one that appeared at the first sign of a winter scratching in the back of your throat, was a tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar, stirred into 8 ounces of warm water with a pinch of cayenne and a generous spoon of honey. You gargled it first. Then you sipped the rest slowly, feeling the heat of the cayenne move through your chest while the honey coated everything raw and tender. Apple cider vinegar's antimicrobial properties create a hostile environment for the bacteria that cause throat infections. The honey has documented antibacterial qualities. Raw honey was used as an antibiotic dressing in World War I field hospitals. The cayenne increases circulation. All of it was free, or as close to free as something can be. And it worked, not because it was magic, but because the biology behind each ingredient is real. Now, here is where things get serious, where we stop talking about cleaning and start talking about something the old people knew that modern medicine is only now beginning to validate with clinical language. Set 2 tablespoons of raw apple cider vinegar in 8 ounces of warm water, 15 minutes before a meal. The mechanism is acetic acid's ability to slow gastric emptying, meaning the stomach releases its contents into the small intestine more slowly, preventing the sharp blood sugar spike that follows a heavy carbohydrate meal. Dr. Carol Johnston at Arizona State University spent 20 years studying vinegar's effects on blood sugar. Her research, published in the journal Diabetes Care, found that 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar taken at bedtime reduced morning fasting blood sugar by up to 6% in type 2 diabetic subjects. A separate study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that vinegar consumed with a white bread meal reduced post-meal blood sugar by approximately 20%. The Black community has been taking a swallow of vinegar for high blood pressure and blood sugar for generations, with no doctor's prescription and no insurance claim. Now there are studies confirming it. A published review at the National Institutes of Health documented what many of us already knew from watching our grandparents, that African Americans reported the highest rates of home remedy use of any demographic studied, and that vinegar specifically was one of the 4 most commonly used remedies, alongside Vaseline, Epsom salts, and baking soda. One participant from that study said exactly this: "I take a swallow of vinegar. If I eat something that is a little salty, you know salt has a tendency to run your blood pressure up. I take a teaspoon or 2 of white vinegar, because they always told me vinegar would reduce the blood pressure. They always told me." That phrase, that's the whole thing right there. That's what this video is really about. The they who told us, the voices who held this knowledge and passed it through kitchens, through Saturday mornings, through everything they couldn't leave behind in writing, but left behind in us instead. There are other hacks that deserve their moment. The shower head clogged by hard water minerals. Submerge it overnight in a bag of white vinegar secured by a rubber band, and every spray hole opens back up by morning. The cutting board that smells like last week's onions, spray it with full-strength vinegar. Let it sit 10 minutes, then follow with a separate spray of hydrogen peroxide before rinsing. Food scientist Susan Sumner at Virginia Polytechnic Institute found this sequential combination is 10 times more effective at killing bacteria than either solution alone. The rusty garden tools soaked overnight in a bucket of straight white vinegar, then scrubbed clean the next morning. Rust dissolves because acetic acid reacts with iron oxide and converts it into a water-soluble salt that simply rinses away. The vase water that keeps flowers blooming 4 days longer than they should, 2 tablespoons of vinegar, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 quart of water, and the bacteria that clog stems and cut off their water supply are stopped before they can start. The hair rinse that costs 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar in 1 cup of cool water poured over the hair after shampooing. Let it sit 3 minutes, rinse. The acidity of the vinegar closes the cuticle of each strand, the outermost layer of the hair shaft, causing light to reflect evenly rather than scatter. The result is visible shine within the first use. It also strips every trace of product buildup from the scalp, the kind that volumizing sprays and dry shampoo leave behind in layers over weeks. Women who paid $20 for Shine serums were replicating something their grandmothers accomplished with a bottle from the pantry. And the collard greens we must end in the kitchen where this all began. A tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in the cold water when you soak and wash the greens. It loosens the grit and the dirt, pulls it off the dark, thick leaves without bruising them. Then another splash during the long cook, an hour, sometimes two, with smoked turkey or ham hocks or fatback, and the vinegar's acidity brightens the whole pot. It cuts through the bitterness that makes people who weren't raised right think they don't like greens. It balances the smokiness, lifts the flavor, and turns what is essentially leafy nutrients and humble protein into something that people will describe years later as one of the best things they ever ate. They will be sitting somewhere, grown, and they will close their eyes and remember that smell from the kitchen. They will remember the sound of the pot bubbling, the steam rising, and someone moving around in there who knew exactly what they were doing. That's who this video is for. For everyone who stood in that kitchen watching and didn't know they were in class. They're for everyone whose grandparents moved with a quiet confidence, no measuring cups, no instructions, no apps, just knowledge that had been passed from one set of hands to another across generations that survived things we can barely imagine. They were not poor because they used vinegar. They were rich in a way that no supermarket product can replicate. Rich in knowing, rich in remembering, rich in the kind of intelligence that isn't taught, only inherited. If you pay attention, if you stay close enough, if you understand that the most important things are sometimes held in the most ordinary looking bottles. The knowledge doesn't disappear on its own. It disappears when we stop listening, when we decide the old ways are just old, rather than understanding that some things are old because they work too well to ever stop being true. A gallon of white vinegar still costs less than $4, and it still does every single thing they said it would. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. It truly means everything. We hope this trip through memory, through wisdom, and through a bottle that connects generations left you feeling something real. If it did, hit that like button. It's the smallest thing you can do, and it helps more than you know. Share this with someone who remembers the vinegar jug under the sink, or with someone who needs to know what they've been missing. And if you want to stay connected to this community of people who still believe in the knowledge passed down to us, hit subscribe. We'll keep showing up for you every single time.